In our last lesson, we discussed subtracting positives on a number line. Today, we're going to talk about subtracting negatives on a number line. So our objective is still, I can understand that subtracting a number is the same as adding its opposite through the use of number lines. So let's just recall from our last lesson. When we subtract a positive, we move left. So in this first example, 6 minus 9, you're subtracting a positive, and so you'd move left. So here we are at 6, 0 to 6, and then we'll move left 9 units, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, getting us back to 0, 7, 8, 9, and we'll end up right there at -3. So when we subtract a positive, you move left. If you have $6 and then you owe someone $9, you're really down $3. So if you subtract a positive, we know from the last lesson we move left. So guess what? When you subtract a negative, if you subtract a negative, you do the opposite of that. Subtract a negative. This time we'll have to move right. Okay? Subtracting a positive, we learned from our last lesson, we definitely need to move left. So if you subtract a negative, you'll need to move to the right. So if you're at 6 minus a -9, 6, 0 to 6, minus a -9, subtracting a negative, move right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 6 minus a -9 actually gets us to 15. And the reason for that is when we're doing subtraction, subtraction is the same as adding the opposite. So today we're going to focus on the fact that subtracting a -9 is actually the exact same thing as adding a +9, and that will be the focus of today's lesson. If you keep in mind, when you subtract a positive, you move left. When you subtract a negative, you move right. That's the key. So let's look at the following example using a vector. Using vectors on a number line, 2 plus a +5. Well, we're adding a positive, we move right. So we know when we add a positive, we move right. So if you're at 2 and you add 5 more, you're up to 7. Very good. Now we're going to use vectors on a number line to find the solution of this expression, 2 minus a -5. Well, we just discussed on the last slide, when we subtract a negative, we move right. Because you'll remember, if you subtract a positive, like 6 minus a +9, you need to move left. Therefore, when you subtract a negative, you do the opposite of that and you move right. So when you subtract a negative, we move right. So if you look at that in terms of vectors. 2, subtracting a negative, move right. We'll move right 5 and we are up to 7. So hopefully from that you get the point that subtracting a -5 is exactly the same as adding a positive. Use vectors on the number line to find the solution. We just did that. Subtracting a -5 gets us to 7. Notice when we subtract a negative, we move right, and that's the important aspect here. Subtract a negative, you need to move to the right on a number line. Does this look similar to the previous problem? And this is the key. When you subtract a negative, it's the same as adding a positive. So let's do some practice problems. So the first thing I look at here, I say, okay, I'm subtracting a negative. So I always fall back on, this is just me, I always know that if I subtract a positive, that was from yesterday, I would move left. So therefore, if I subtract a negative, subtracting a negative, if I subtract a negative, I must do the opposite of that or move to the right. So if I look here and I say I first go from 0 to 3, subtract a negative means move right. As soon as I see subtract negative, I say move right. So I'm going to move right. How many units? 2 units. And I'll end up there at a positive 5. Keep in mind, subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. And we're going to develop rules in a few days where we realize that 3 minus a negative 2, subtracting a negative actually is exactly the same as adding a positive. So what's 3 plus 2? Well, if you start at 3 and you add 2 to that, you still end up at 5. Another practice problem, as soon as you're ready to pause the video and try on your own, please feel free to. If you need to stick with me for now, stick with me for now. I always know when I subtract a negative, that's the first thing I look at. I say, okay, I'm subtracting a negative. When I subtract a negative, immediately in my mind on a number line, I know I need to move right. When we subtracted positives, we moved left. So I'll do the opposite of that. To subtract a negative, I'll move right. So then I say, okay, I'm going to go from 0 to 4. I'm going to move right. I'm moving right. How many? I'm moving right 1. So I'm like, okay, that answer must be 5. And another way to look at it, subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. So as soon as you think, okay, I'm doing 4 minus a negative 1, subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. What's 4 plus 1? So what's 4? And add 1 more. Of course, 4 plus 1 we've been doing since we were in kindergarten is 5. I'm hoping you're going to pause and try this one on your own. If you need to stick with me, just stick with me. Negative 2 minus a negative 5. So again, that negative 2 is just our starting point. And then minus a negative. As soon as I'm subtracting a negative, subtract a negative, I say, okay, I must move right. So if I'm starting point 0 to negative 2, my starting point is at negative 2, I'm moving to the right. How many? Moving to the right 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, that gets me to, well, it doesn't get me to a positive 3, I'll tell you that. Or it doesn't get me to a positive 5, it gets me to a positive 3. Subtracting a negative, totally the same as adding a positive. So if you have negative 2 minus a negative 5, minus a negative is the same as adding. So negative 2 plus 5, again, you just think your starting point is at negative 2. You went from 0 to negative 2 with the first vector. Then we're adding 5. Says, okay, I need to move 5 units to the right. When I move 5 units to the right, of course, I end up at 3. That means you owe someone $2 and then you find $5 on the street. Well, once you pay them back, you're still up $3. Remember, subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. So anytime you subtract a negative, you can just go ahead and add a positive. Subtracting a negative, you can just go ahead and add the positive. What I need for you to do at this point is definitely pause the video because I'm not walking you through these. Subtract the following. You can use the number line provided to help you. So pause the video, try them out, and then I'll tell you the correct answers in a minute. So 4 minus a negative 5, 4, that's 4 plus 5 is 9. Negative 4 minus a negative 5 would be negative 4 plus 5, and that's a 1. 0 minus a negative 7, 0 plus 7 is 7. 9 minus a negative 2 would be 9 plus 2 is 11. Negative 9 minus a negative 2 would be negative 9 plus 2, and that gets me back to negative 7. Hopefully you tried those out on your own and did a nice job. What I need for you to do next is your exit ticket. When you're set with your exit ticket, I will be around to check. If you're waiting on me after your exit ticket, you can move on to your next video if you choose.